I think because this holiday is even more focused than just European and North American and Western hemispherically
Hmm.
focused, like Lego sometimes tends to be, that could explain why these spooky sets, which are even of that Halloween subset, even more sort of focused, right? Because things like the creature from the Black Lagoon is like distinctly North American from like the 50s in terms of its cultural cachet and sort of existence within the larger Halloween theme, right?
Hello, bricks, chicks, and minifigures. You are listening to AFOLs Welcome, where we talk about all things Lego from the perspective of two adult collectors. We are your co-host. I'm Grinch,
And I'm West.
and today we are discussing why scary Lego themes don't do well, or do they? It's spooky season. Let's get into the episode. But before we do that, let's head over to some exciting Lego news. Exciting Lego news. West, kind of a quiet news week, wasn't it?
Yeah, there wasn't a ton. We got some reveals this week that we kind of already knew about, so that didn't really push the needle on exciting Lego news so much. But there's not a ton to report. Grinch, what did you see this week?
So we had the Star Wars Encyclopedia reveal, another book, which more importantly means another exclusive minifigure. In this case, it's a Episode 9 Palpatine. We've got the Botanical Gardens, obviously officially revealed, with as well as the gift with purchase. There are some leaks out there for some 2025 sets starting to come out, so we won't cover those leaks until they're more official. But then we got some other kind of non-set related news here with Lego Pick-a-Brick updates and some Lego sets on sale at lego.com. So, Wes, did you want to talk about any of these in particular?
Well, I'll just not add, sorry. What really stands out to me this week was that news about Lego Pick-a-Brick being able to upload your, files to your lists to kind of put in a mass purchase. And I think this is a really cool feature. I'm really excited that Lego's doing this. We have talked about this sort of adjacently in the past about building out sets through Pick-a-Brick purchases or purchases on Bricklink to just basically assemble the set yourself. And I think that is a really great strategy for Lego builders who maybe want the set but don't necessarily need it with instructions or used. Like they're not collecting it for collector's sake. They want it to put it into a city. So, for example, I did that with the Brickbank modular and the Detective's Office modular, where I really wanted the buildings and what came with them, but I didn't necessarily want to pay the modular prices for them. I still ended up more or less paying the modular prices for them, but I parted stuff out from my own collection. I parted stuff out from Bricklink, and I parted stuff out on Pick-a-Brick.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be a really neat feature to, for example, like I've wanted to expand the boutique hotel, and that's going to require me putting together a parts list to then go and upload onto, being able to just upload it right away onto Pick-a-Brick is just a really nice feature. I think that's really cool.
I think the nicest part about this for me is that now that Lego owns Bricklink, I've been surprised something hasn't changed, and I'm glad it hasn't changed to Legos because there's different naming conventions we talked about on our color episode. So whenever I've used Pick-a-Brick in the past, I'm like, I want light bluish gray 1x1 modified plate with a horizontal clip, and then it's like, sorry, we don't have that piece, and I'm like, what? I'm like scrolling to, I'm like going to find a set number that I know has the piece, so I can scroll through to like find it, and I'm like, oh, there it is. Oh, it's light stone gray, clip tile. I'm like, oh, but a modified plate with the horizontal clip makes way more sense to me. So this will be, now you can just take the part ID, right? And you want that element ID, and you want it in that color, and you can upload that. So that's huge.
I think it is still odd though that now that Lego owns Bricklink, that they have not reconciled the different naming conventions. Because they totally have the power to do that, and it kind of, I feel like, would behoove them to do that. I know people would be upset, like when Apple comes out with a new charger on a phone or something. Be like,
I only think,
why do you always have to change things? But like, I think if we were all working on the same sheet of music, that would not necessarily be the worst thing in the world.
I would only be annoyed is if they went to Lego's convention. Like Bricklink just has a way better naming, like just period. It just
who knows though, like what Lego would have to change internally if they have that convention already established, like from their manufacturing process.
I think what we should do after this episode, you and I, is go look up on a new piece that has come out. In the past year or two, and see, does Lego's naming convention match Bricklink's naming convention? Because my guess is having to update Bricklink's database would be just as much work, obviously, as updating Lego's database, right? If you had to go retroactively change everything, it's not necessarily a one-to-one switch. You'd have to do all that work. So I don't know. It'd be, because nobody, unless there is an element ID on Bricklink, which I don't know if there is, or maybe there's not on Lego. One of them might not have it. There's nothing in the database to look up one thing off of the other, right?
Yeah.
So there'd be a lot of manual matching.
Yeah.
And there's not enough interns in the world to do that.
It is difficult to go back and forth, and I mean, like, dark blue is earth blue, I believe, in Lego. So, like I said, I think it would be interesting I think it would make sense for them to combine. I mean, I am a bad American, but I also think like we should stop using the metric system and the standard system, imperial system, and just pick one of them. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of ridiculous that like we have these two different measurement systems, which is way outside the topic of Lego. But
what are you talking about? If we do that, what am I going to do for half of my chemistry lesson converting units?
That's a good point. I mean,
I'm going to have to do chemistry. Like, what the hell? That was always my favorite part. Was you spend like
just the math.
Chem 101 is like the first half of chemistry is literally just like, hey guys, so we got to take this from ounces to mLs, and you're like, or we could just do it in mLs, or we could just do it in ounces.
Yeah,
we're beginner chemists. This isn't like a chemistry summit in Geneva every year, and we're all geeking out together, guys. Like, we are writing these prompts actually.
Yeah,
and we still can't get it right.
There is something, I have an engineering background and a technical background in that capacity, and so I will say, both in my own field and then from an engineering perspective, there really truly is something to say when you can create a standard like that and stick to it. So I think Lego eventually either adopting the common naming convention that is used by Bricklink and other entities, or effectively saying like, no, we're going to use ours, because again, there's a lot on the back end or internally that is built around this, and to change that would be a lot, versus having you guys just change the way that you reference pieces. I think would maybe be the right, one of those is the right answer. Our current state of affairs just feels a little complicated. So going back to this point, right? If Bricklink, to your point, if Bricklink generates both the part ID and the element ID, right? Which, as we talked about in the past, the Lego element is both the piece and the color combination, right? I think, if you were to build something on Bricklink, have it all colored correctly or the way you wanted it to be, and then upload that parts file into Pick-a-Brick, that would make things really easy for builders and mock builders. And
Well, so on that note, actually,
Mhm.
Brickset now has the ability where you can download a set's inventory in a CSV and upload it to
Okay,
Brick. There,
nice.
I just don't listen to what I just said. Pick a brick is what I meant to say. I said something else. You'll have to go back and listen to it because I'll keep it in there. Um, oops.
I knew what you were
So
saying.
that you can take a set Bumpies and Kylosaurs, for example. In the Brickset database, you can download it and then have all the parts and just upload it right into Pick a Brick. So that if you
Yeah.
need XYZ pieces or something like that, you can get them pretty easily. So there's also been some sets on sale on Lego.com. These sets are all retiring soon. If you were trying to wait to get the Hoopty on sale, now's your chance. It's 30% off. Little Mermaid is 40% off. Venomized Groot, Endgame Final Battle. There's some Friend sets. Baby Rocket, Pirate Snub Fighter, Mars Base. I think that's also a Friends one. The Agrabah. Sorry about mispronouncing that. I'm not a big Aladdin fan. Disney Palace set, couple of Ninjago sets. These are all in the 30 to 40% off range, and they're all retiring soon, as well as BTS Dynamite. So if you are looking to get any of those sets, now is your chance to get a good deal on them on Lego, so you can also get your VIP points or your insider points.
And let's be clear too, the Hoopty isn't on sale. It's now being offered at the price it always should have been.
It is now the GSRP, the Grinch suggested retail price, not the manufacturer, the Grinch suggested retail price of $62.99.
Yeah.
Which somehow still feels kind of expensive, but that's okay. So the Botanical Gardens gift with purchase, we talked about Botanical Gardens last week. There are some new rose pieces as well as tulip pieces. Those look super cool. And then we
More
did
than
get
just
this
that, too.
Botanical Gardens gift with purchase. What else is?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a couple of other new pieces. Yeah, there's a lot of new recolors as well,
So
and there's a couple new pieces too.
1x5 arch piece that's new. It really doesn't change the current piece other than it had a 1x2 tile, or not tile, but plate extender on the 1x5 arch, and now it's just a 1x1 extender.
Oh,
If that
okay,
makes sense.
nice. Yeah, no,
And
that's
then
super helpful, actually.
there's a new corner window piece, which is
Yep.
really cool. And this set has 12 of them. So I think between the corner window pieces, the new rose and tulip pieces, they have some recolors. Yeah, that set looks like it's going to be really fun. So
My only problem, we talked a little bit about gift with purchases last week, but with this one, this would be a gift with purchase because I'm not going to get the Botanical Gardens, but this would be a gift with purchase that I would get because it does come with those new pieces,
mm-hmm.
But I won't. I mean, I won't because you have to get the Botanical Gardens, and that I will be uploading a CSV onto Pick a Brick to get those new pieces from.
There you go.
And I will say, PSA, since we've talked about it a lot, you can use Pick a Brick to make a gift with purchase threshold. So if you're ever sitting there and you're like, ooh, I need $10 more. I don't really want to, I need $10 more, but the only Lego sets I want are $200. If you want some new pieces, some cool prints, new tulip pieces, for example, a goat, whatever, if it's on Pick a Brick, go put a Pick a Brick order in and get over that threshold. And you can really control how much over that threshold you go. So just a pro tip for anybody who's listening. That also applies just, if you ever need to meet a threshold and you don't want to buy a set, but you want to buy pieces, use Pick a Brick to get to that threshold. Your gift with purchase will ship separate from that order.
The cool thing with Pick a Brick too is they have the best-selling pieces and then the kind of regular stockpile. For a few months, like last year, you could only get the best-selling pieces for some reason, but they opened it back up. But the best-selling pieces ship within like a week. Like that, they will be included in your Lego purchase from Lego.
Right.
So they arrive very, very fast.
The other ones can take a while sometimes.
Yeah, but even then, usually I think I've only waited like a month, maybe 6 weeks for stuff. So it's
Yeah.
always nice when they do arrive. Just as a note of caution for all Lego fans, adult or growing adolescent fans of Lego as well. This is still a lot like the pick a brick at the Lego store, and your appetite, your eyes and your appetite might be greater than your need. So don't buy 100 baguettes. You don't have any use for them.
Or do you, if you're making a
orange.
baguette Mac that West is going to
That's
make one of
true.
these days?
Yeah. A bunch of orange translucent cheese slopes. You don't have a use for those. So I may or may not be speaking from experience. So
I was at the Lego store one time, and like pro tip, if you're ever using the pick a brick wall, snap your pieces together, because if you put them in the container, they will fit literally as perfect as possible if you snap them together. So I was there with my wife one time, and this dude, he's over there, he's like piling up plates, just snapping them together. I'm like, oh, this guy, that's like, babe, this guy knows what he's doing. He's legit. And then he goes over, and it wasn't like the baguettes or something. It was like some random like slope piece. And
yeah.
it was the candle flame, because it was Halloween of last year. They put the little candle flame piece.
Mm-hmm.
Just starts like scooping out handfuls. and then my wife goes, "That looks like Ian with those baguettes." I was like, "Yeah, maybe he doesn't know what he's doing."
I have a lot of baguettes for the city. Nobody is going to go hungry. So I actually am a benevolent overlord of my Lego city.
Well, speaking of benevolent overlords, that sounds frightening. Let's go ahead and move over to our main topic today. Today's topic. All right, so for today's topic, we're talking really about why scary or spooky Lego themes don't do well. And I say don't do well for a reason. We'll get to that here in a moment. But they also kind of do well. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, but overall the themes don't do well. So, West, I'm going to hand it over to you for a quick kind of disclaimer about this topic before we get into it.
Yeah, so before we really dive into the general kind of our take on the scary Lego themes or spooky Lego themes, we do want to share that for this episode, it's our impression that these sets did not perform well due to a variety of factors, and we're going to talk about them in the episode. So what we have to acknowledge, right, is that Lego sales data is more or less impossible to get as somebody not working within the company, right? Lego is notorious about keeping that information pretty quiet.
They're a private organization. They don't have to disclose it. Yeah.
Right. But we do have some indicators for Lego theme performance. And so we're going to talk about those. We're going to try to justify our impression. But at the end of the day, we do want to just share that this is our impression that these themes have not performed well. But we don't necessarily have hard data to back that up.
So let's talk about what some of these themes are. And this is why I kind of said they don't do well, but they kind of do all right at the end of the day, because there's some hardcore nostalgia here, right? I mean, every Lego fan knows what these themes are, but as we lay them out, none of them lasted more than a calendar year or 18 months max. They might have had sets released in 2 years, but it was, within an 18-month period, right?
Yeah.
But there are some of arguably top 20 Lego sets of all times we're about to talk about. So it's interesting, like when you think about that, like, do they not do well, or do certain sets do well and the theme itself doesn't do well? Like, and that's really the discussion that we wanted to have today. So West, I think we've outlined 5 or 6 kind of main, like these are the purpose of this theme is to be a spooky, scary Lego theme, right? And then there's a couple other, adjacent themes as well. Why don't you talk about and go over what some of those themes are?
Yeah, so our core spooky themes that we've identified, right, in order of release, starting with the most recent to kind of some of the more older ones. We have most recently the Hidden Side theme, followed up by Monster Fighters and Scooby-Doo. Sorry, Scooby-Doo and then Monster Fighters, technically. Fright Nights. We also have the Lego Studios horror themes, the sub-theme within Lego Studios. And then we also have kind of adjacent to that, or sort of while that's all occurring, a Lego CMF Wave Series 14 that specifically focuses on kind of spooky or horror themes.
That we have was identified 2016 or 15.
Okay, yeah. We've also have seen sets within Lego Ideas that kind of fill that niche, right? And I have some interesting arguments for why that probably those ones seem to work better than others. And then we also identified sets or themes that we thought were kind of spooky adjacent, that had some maybe spooky sort of elements to them, but weren't necessarily as advertised spooky themes, right? So one of the ones that's the most recent that we addressed was Dreams and Time Cruisers. So
right, kind of a gothic, fantasy horror almost, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then we also, have not mentioned just small things, the, Lego extras or expansion. They had that, I think, 2 years ago, there was some Halloween, not battle packs, but like brick packs that you could get when you purchased a set. Yeah. There's the, pumpkins that this year was released, the jack-o'-lantern. So there are sort of little one-offs within the creator theme, the gift with purchase area, the sort of general Lego holidays theme that they do.
Yeah, I don't know what
Easter.
I think it's just called seasonal, right? It's not like creator per se. It's not icons. It's just like Lego seasonal. It's the ones that you find on the little island in the Lego store.
Yep. Which is kind of, I mean, it is sort of adjacent to creator, but yeah, it's weird. It's a little strange.
Now I will say too, we didn't mention, and when West, I apologize, I didn't include this in our notes, but we literally this month got Wednesday sets, right, as well as Wicked sets. Those are in the Friends line, which if Lego isn't spooky enough, Mini Dolls is even less spooky. Since those are so new, we're not really talking about those in this episode. And I also have to say, because my wife listens, yes, Harry Potter Lego is a thing. We are excluding that from this conversation because that's more of a well-known, solidified cultural IP. And in this case, we are talking about wizards and witches, but that's a different kind of classification in my book of wizard, witches, werewolves, ghouls, etc.
That's an interesting one. Because I know a lot of people actually associate Harry Potter with like the Christmas holiday versus Halloween. So
yeah, don't they? It's kind of interesting
distinction there. But then also, with respect to Wednesday and Wicked, right? Those are sub themes within Friends, and it's hard for us to use. Again, we already talked about sort of the challenge we have with data, sales data. But when you're talking about a theme like Friends that does really, really well, it's hard to use like a one-off wave.
They're standalone. They're standalone themes. They're their own theme.
That's fair. Yeah.
They just use Mini Dolls.
They're just done in the Friends, standard, the Mini Doll standard. Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Well, never mind. We'll see how they do, I guess. Well, but something like Wednesday, right? Like that's a Netflix show, so like sure
Correct.
that could perform well, but like I anyways, yeah, I don't think we're gonna see, and Wicked's a movie, right? So
Mm-hmm. On Netflix
we
as
have
well,
to
I think, right?
acknowledge that there's like a timeliness to this that's gonna be introduced as well, right? So we're not gonna see multiple waves of Wicked probably, nor will we
Well,
probably see multiple waves of Wednesday. So
and
from the
the
start, it's hard to use
and
that
the
as an
kind of like
indicator.
social media anecdote, right? Of like,
Mm-hmm.
usually the metric people use is, do I see people talking about it?
Right.
And I see, even though I'm not the target audience, I still oftentimes see people talking about sets, right? Like I see people talking about Friends all the time. I
Mm-hmm.
don't see people talking about these sets, and they just came out.
Yeah.
So TBD on those. A little too early to tell, which is why we won't be discussing them today.
Yeah.
And I do want to add, where we do have some firm data is in pricing, right?
Yeah.
On
Absolutely.
current price, retail price, etc. And the Series 14, part of the reason we're claiming it doesn't do well, and again, disclaimer, we're not saying Scooby-Doo doesn't sell well right now. We're saying it didn't sell well, otherwise Lego would keep doing it and they wouldn't have given the IP to Mega Block. But the Series 14, we do have some pretty good data on it. When you look at Brick Economy and you look at boxes of minifigures, if you look at, Series 16, 15, 20, 21, etc., they all live in this $300 range for a box. Even Team GB from Germany is like $280. When you look at Series 14, it's $230. So almost 30% less than those other kind of themes right now. Obviously, Series 10, where you got Mr. Gold getting a full box, is insane, right? I'm excluding that from this conversation and going to more realistic numbers here. You typically see these in a $300 range, but for some reason, Series 14 is just not as desirable. And I remember when I was collecting all the old series of CMFs, I had them ordered in terms of value and like who was increasing the most. I'm like, I'm going to go buy that one, whichever is growing the fastest right now I'm going to get. So if I have to wait on anything, and Series 14 was always the one I was just waiting for because the price literally never changed on it. So that is some areas where we do have some data on this. But otherwise, we're really looking at a lot of these themes saying they just didn't sell, right? Hidden Side. That second wave was all on clearance. It pretty much went to shelf on clearance with the first wave already at clearance. Scooby-Doo, they did 5 sets. Now, I don't go ahead, talk in the comment section about how Velma is like a $100 minifigure, but that's because she was only ever released in this one set, and they did come out with Scooby-Doo sets later in Dimensions, so they didn't totally lose the IP rights. They sat on it. A few years later, they came out with the Dimension booster, but no new Scooby-Doo sets because those didn't sell. But you talk to people now, and they're like, man, I could really go for some Scooby-Doo sets, right? So in that case, was Scooby-Doo too soon, do you think? Or was, Lego just kind of in this weird spot in 2015 where it was still growing in collection, but what do you think, West?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I apologize because I'm also pulling up the Series 14 just to kind of take a look at it in more detail of
they're really
what we're
good.
looking at here. They did.
They're cool minifigures.
Really fun. Yeah. I think the thing with these sets, right, and like you talked about, it's hard to, when we talk about sets that aren't doing well versus sets that are, right, like, to kind of parallel that, we talked about the Monster Fighter sets, and that haunted house that the Monster Fighter set has is one of the a very sought after set at the moment. People really. I mean,
that was the set that I said would be in everybody's top 20, right? Like that set has
Yeah. I thought you were actually
transcended.
talking about Hidden Side for a second.
No, West. Only you talk about Hidden Side in that manner. Do I
No,
need to?
I'm teasing.
I need to repost the meme on our Instagram of the old
Yeah,
grandpa, and it's just
yeah.
like West talking about Hidden Side, and it's like Hidden Side's goaded, and it's like, okay, let's get you back to bed, Grandpa.
I think that it's not so much Hidden Side. I actually thought you were talking about Scooby Doo in all seriousness, but
Oh, no, 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 no! It's the Monster Fighter house, that haunted house.
yeah.
Like you go to Lego conventions, somebody has a bigger version of that or a mock of that. You watch Lego Masters Australia, like you're like, wonder where you got that idea for that monster house. You said they are fighting monsters, you said? Like,
No, that's it's interesting to see that, and like you talked about, right? So like getting into kind of our thought process here, our big indicator for performance is number of waves and how long the set has been on the shelf for, or how long
mhm,
we saw the sets released for. And in all of these cases, Hidden Side probably got the most, right? They got 3 distinct waves in Hidden Side.
yeah,
But things like
19 total
Scooby-Doo,
sets.
Fright Night, Monster Fighters, right? We all saw somewhere between one, maybe 1.5 to 2 waves, depending. I
Hmm.
don't know how, like Fright Nights, for example, that one was a 9 set series released from 97 to 98.
That one's really
That was probably
interesting.
2 distinct waves, but
Yeah, that one's really interesting too because it's Fright Nights with a K,
mhm.
and that was a sub theme of Castle. So that was when I don't feel like Castle was getting a little bit dry, but clearly Lego did because right after this we got ninjas. So this was when they were
Yeah,
kind of exploring, like, you know,
the different
okay,
castle themes.
we can't keep doing medieval Europe Castle, right? We got to
I
start
think they
branching out. So
probably could have, though, and people would have been just fine with that.
that's yes, yes,
knowing
yes.
knowing how popular the castle theme is now and how much people look back on that with nostalgia, I think Lego had a cash cow there. They couldn't sit on what was working.
I think Fright Nights
Oh
was
dear.
cool because, like, traditionally what they've done is they've done, like, a gray castle with blue to be like good guys. Well, these were like
Mm,
black castles with like red accents. So, like, very Star Wars Imperial esque. And they
yeah,
had, like, they rode dragons instead of horses and stuff like that. So it was kind of a cool take. It was different.
yeah,
I can
yeah.
certainly respect this one.
I think there's certainly a lot of fun there, and yeah, that dragon piece is always a famous Lego piece,
Hmm.
featured quite heavily in the 90s and early 2000s, and a lot of like Lego commercial imagery and stuff that
Hmm.
they put out. I remember distinctly that dragon, like Magisto the Wizard. The Ghost was always a popular one. So, but anyways, let's get back into the topic of why these things haven't performed well, and sort of our indicators, right? So, like we talked about, our general impression here is the fact that Lego wouldn't necessarily pull some of these waves off the shelves unless they were performing well, right? Like we
Hmm.
see that time and time again. Ninjago's gets numbers of reboots, right? We see Harry Potter revised and revised and revised again, right? And usually with good effect. People get upset over the Sand Speeder getting released over and over and over again, but like each subsequent version of the Sand Speeder, in my opinion, does make a better Sand Speeder than the previous one. So, like if these themes were doing really well, we would see them re-released. And to your point of something like Scooby Doo, right? Like that has become you know a hugely popular set right now, and with only 5 sets in the series,
Right.
you know there's there's an argument that there definitely could be more to that. Now, breaking that down a little bit, right? Something like Scooby Doo, for example, you're taking a serialized TV show where it might be harder to find episodes that everybody is connected with. And so maybe that explains why what seems like a very lucrative IP actually didn't stretch very far, because it's like, are we referencing season 2 episode 6? Like, is everybody aware of what we're referencing when we reference this episode, you know? So maybe there's some reasons too why something like
Yeah,
Scooby-Doo is
I
a
think
little harder
they've
in
done more of
execution.
like the movie references and that, you know, because they had quite a few um Scooby-Doo movies that they referenced, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. But Grinch, what are your thoughts? I mean, you know, to the point that we've been trying to make, right? We've seen that Lego CMF Series 14 doesn't perform super well.
Yeah.
We've seen
Yeah,
all
so
of these themes kind of come to an early termination, or what feels like an early termination. Why do you
right.
think that is?
Well, I hate to be this content creator, but I'm gonna do it. You know that guy that's like, or girl that's like, oh, I'm not gonna compare this to this, but I'm gonna do that. I'm about to do that. So I'm not trying to compare scary, spooky themes to Star Wars Lego, right? That's the point is not to say this is that or this is like that. I'm trying to use this as a way to encapsulate what we mean by Lego clearly does not lean into these sets, right? Star Wars. There were 50 Star Wars sets this year and counting. I think it's 55 to be exact. 54 to be exact, sorry. There were 54 Star Wars sets. We are looking across 2 decades of spooky sets here. 2 decades, 20 years of spooky sets. And there are 46 sets on this list. If you count ideas, there's 48. If you count Jaws as a spooky set, there's 49. There were more Star Wars Lego sets released this single year. And actually, this is 3 decades of Lego sets versus the 30 years of Lego spooky sets. Crossing 6 different themes. So if that doesn't tell you the lack of commitment to this from Lego and why we're talking about why these don't perform well, then I don't know what will. So again, I'm not trying to say, you know, I'm comparing this to Star Wars. Obviously, nothing does as good as Star Wars does in Lego, right? Although arguably a lot of things do a lot of things better, but you know, empirically looking at like set releases, etc., set size, nothing does quite as good as Star Wars. So there is a lack of a lean in from Lego here, right?
You know, and I wanted to kind of take a step back and provide maybe some like a larger cultural discussion here.
Provide, brother.
Is that if you kind of think about Lego and their target demographic and audiences and everything else, right? Something like Halloween is even more focused than something like Christmas, for example, right? And we've talked about how like Christmas for Lego has kind of become like more of like the winter holiday theme, right? As they're trying to maybe, and you know, for right or wrong, and some listeners I think are gonna appreciate this, and some are gonna be like, no, I really like the Christmas aspect of stuff, but trying to generalize the winter holiday season for not just people of a Christian faith background, but also, you know,
it's commercialized,
again, right? Yeah, and you know, everybody gets the winter break off. Not everybody celebrates Christmas during the winter break. Surprise, surprise.
Right.
So I think generalizing that for just sort of the winter holiday season is not necessarily a bad thing. But, you know, Halloween is even more focused, right? It's not even just like something from like Christian Europe. It's even more focused to like English Europe. And so it's a huge North American tradition here in the United States to celebrate Halloween, right? We see some of that tradition shared with Mexico with the Day of the Dead. And we see, I'm sure Canada has their own take on Halloween as well. And then just a brief glance at Wikipedia tells me that Halloween kind of was an Irish and Scottish tradition to start with. And so I'm wondering.
Well, and before that, it was pagan, right? It was like the fall harvest change, and then it was just like Easter, how Easter was like the spring change and the rebirth, and then different religions pick up different aspects of it, different cultures pick up different aspects of it, and it starts to. I can go down a whole rabbit hole about Groundhog's Day if you need me to, but I won't. It was the Germans, by the way.
Nice.
If he sees his shadow, that's because it's sunny, and that means it's gonna be cloudy. So that's winter will keep coming. He's not afraid of his shadow. It's because the sun's out. So he's like, "Oh crap, we're gonna have another storm here." So he gets under his hole. Anyways,
nice. Yeah, Groundhog's Day. What a fun tradition. we use a little marmot
Phil
to help predict the weather. That's just how crazy it is sometimes. Anyways,
you're scaring me.
Oh dear. I think I get what I'm getting at. Let me round up my thesis here for a second, or my thought is that
round it out.
Let me get to the point, which is that I think because this holiday is even more focused than just European and North American and Western hemispherically focused, like Lego sometimes tends to be, that could explain why these spooky sets, which are even of that Halloween subset, even more sort of focused, right? Because things like the creature from the Black Lagoon is like distinctly North American from like the 50s in terms of its cultural cachet and sort of existence within the larger Halloween theme, right? Some of them go into like a little bit of Lovecraftian horror, not as much as I think some people would like. I certainly would like to see more of that. In our Hidden Side episode, I shared that I saw a lot of similarities between Hidden Side and like the writings of Stephen King, and would have loved if Lego leaned in again more into that, which is why, if you recall, my argument on Hidden Side was not that the theme itself was great, but that the potential for the theme could have been great. So,
Wes, what I'm don't lie. You think about Hidden Side at night every night before you go to bed.
I do think about it a lot. No,
you know that meme of the girl who's like looking the other direction, and she's like, he's probably thinking about other women, and it's just Wes like, oh, if we had a season 4 of Hidden Side, we could have really gone into some nice Midwestern horror culture.
Oh dear.
I'm gonna have to go to Meme Maker and make another meme today.
The Mothman, Hidden Side, or like any of that weird like West Virginia stuff.
I drove through that city the other day, by the way.
Did you really?
And I was like, what's it called again? What's that city?
I don't remember.
It's not Amityville. That's in Massachusetts. Or New York. Anyways, I digress. I drove through it. It's in West Virginia. And I was like, oh.
There's apparently some pretty spooky stuff in West Virginia.
Well, yeah, like West Virginia.
It's not being made to
I can say that because I'm from Virginia, so we have a nice rivalry.
Yeah. I do think, of you who are not aware of the history, West Virginia used to be part of Virginia, and so
morally they were all in the right, and they're in West Virginia's defense. Fair. Morally, they were in the right. However, things seem to have changed recently for some unbeknownst reason. But politics aside,
we're digressing.
I do think you kind of set me up really well here, Wes, because I wanted to make a point, right? And for the listeners, you don't know this, but we share notes when we have these meetings, and I intentionally did not include this in those notes because I wanted to bring up this point to West and kind of get his live reaction. And it's West Virginia should be absorbed back into Virginia. No, I'm just kidding. There's something you mentioned a lot in your thesis here, right? And that was a holiday of Halloween. None of these sets are none of these themes are Halloween based. We as consumers inherently associate them with Halloween, but Hidden Side came out in the summer, right?
Yeah.
I think that came out in May originally. And then we got another theme in that fall. And then we got
I think
another
it was even
wave
the spring,
like that
actually.
January. Right. So
Yeah.
like this is not a Halloween theme, right? Studios Horror was not a Halloween theme. Fright Nights, based off of the real Fright Nights of medieval Europe, just kidding, was not a Halloween theme, right? Scooby Doo was based off the Scooby Doo IP, not Halloween. But every single year, what do you do at Halloween? You'll probably do it more now that you've got a kid. You watch Scooby Doo, right? Monster Fighters was also not based off of Halloween. So inherently, I think the challenge that Lego has with something like this IP is exactly what you were talking about of, well, these, it's based off of how people celebrate Halloween. Again, these aren't Halloween sub-themes. And in my house, we watch scary movies year round. My wife loves them. We have a subscription to Shudder, the streaming service with only scary movies. And most houses aren't going to be like that, though, right? When it comes to the holidays, that's now becoming even more of a season, right? I mean, crap, I'm in stores right now and all the Halloween stuff's on clearance and all the Christmas stuff's out already. And so that is more of an event than anything else, right? And that lingers into January even. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, it's still snowing, so this is still appropriate to have this snow themed. You don't really get that, right? The fall season doesn't necessarily come to life in Lego. Like I can't think of a fall harvest or a fall Lego set outside of Halloween. And even within Halloween, these are not Halloween-based IPs. So I think that's some of the kind of challenges Lego has to overcome is that there's a bunch of seasonality to these Lego sets. And we don't quite have it charted out. When you're talking, I'll see if I can get some of this information, but I don't think it's going to be quite in the way that I want it. I bet there's some seasonality to these sets, right? So for example, using the Monster Fighters Haunted House, let's say it's $480 on the secondary market new, probably closer to $600. Does it stay around $600 and maybe go up by 4 or 5% month over month every month, and then come October, September, does it jump up to 12 or 20%? And then drop back down to 5% and slowly climb up? I'm going to see if that data is available. But my guess is these themes just don't sell well in the summer, right? When you're out at the beach on vacation with your family, you're not like, oh man, no, it'd be really cool. This Nightmare Before Christmas set. Let's go. Let's get it. Let's do it. Let's build this thing. What you're going to do is you're going to say, I got that set. If you did get it, I'm going to wait till Christmas to build it. Or I'm going to wait till Halloween to build it. Right? Scooby-Doo, right? Scooby-Doo. I just watched the Scooby-Doo Mystery Island movie. Let's go get that set. When did you watch it? On October 26th, because it's a couple days before Halloween. So that's my thought here is that Lego struggles to overcome keeping an interest of the average consumer throughout the year, right? Obviously, there's the diehard Scooby fans, right? There's the people that love Eldritch horror and your Lovecraftian horror, right? Throughout the year, but that's probably the exception and not, your everyday case.
No, that's a great point. And there is a lot of connections between and like we talked about with like Fright Nights, right? Like not necessarily a spooky theme. It's definitely, well, we called it one of our core spooky themes, but on its own, right, doesn't necessarily even tie into the holidays. So that can help explain too why that one struggled on its own. They're very distinct sets. They take on very distinct looks, and because I think there isn't enough sort of cultural momentum with the holiday, or because the holiday is such a specific time of year, right, that I think more recently we've seen Halloween take on a larger role in the United States. I mean, like my neighbors have these blow up decorations and laser lights with ghosts on them and stuff like that. Wasn't how we celebrated Halloween when we were younger. We certainly went trick-or-treating and stuff and dressed in costumes, but like we weren't decorating our lawns with a lot of stuff. And I mean, like people have people are almost taking Halloween decorations to the length that they take Christmas decorations at this point,
Mm-hmm.
which is to an extreme. Which is funny. I live in a community where a lot of people move, and so you're like, wow, you're hauling all of this stuff with you every single time you move. This is kind of ridiculous. Like these skeletons are just like in a box that somebody's gonna open up. Like the packers are gonna be like, oh, where do you want this? Just a bunch of
Yeah,
skeletons.
they totally
But
don't do that with my Legos either.
but I did want to share
Sir,
too.
where do you want us to put your skeletons in the closet? Yeah, just leave them in there, right
No,
there
in
next
the
to all my
closet,
baggage.
please.
Yes.
Please, yeah. Like, oh dear.
You see that altar
Nice.
that I was left? No, not left at. Sorry, that different baggage.
That's a good joke.
Ah,
Anyways, yeah. Where I think these sets actually do really well is when they are like hyper focused. So we see Scooby-Doo doing extremely well on the secondary market, right?
mm-hmm.
We see the Lego Ideas theme being probably one of the best venues for some of these sets, right? More recently, we got the Nightmare Before Christmas set. We got the Hocus Pocus set. They all have to hit a certain degree of, fan voting, right? So they have to hit a certain level of external support. While we have to acknowledge that just because you vote for an idea set doesn't mean you're going to go buy it, right? To some extent, we can connect the support required for a set to become an idea set with support for that set overall, or general support for the theme. And so I think in smaller doses we see these sets performing really well, right? We get a lot of great feedback from that. It's when we start to create a whole theme around it where we start to struggle. And again, that could be maybe just theme to theme, right? Hidden Side was a theme Lego created on its own. And we've talked about some of the missteps of Hidden Side, right? Its connection with augmented reality. It's poor, while the art of it looked really fun, when you were looking at the sets in the store, it wasn't immediately clear what you were buying based off of the box art on the Hidden Side set. And so you kind of had to know what you were getting into when you bought the set, right? It's hard to speak to Monster Fighters and Fright Nights. That was so long ago in terms of sales, but something like Scooby-Doo, like we talked about, right? The challenge with Scooby-Doo because it's a serialized TV show, it's hard to base it off of one specific moment in like a movie or something like that was really distinct and unique, right? Whereas like with Harry Potter, I don't know why this is the first set that came to mind, but I'm thinking of the Triwizard Tournament set that they just came out with that had like the little tower and underwater scene that Lego created. And like we all are aware of what that scene is because we've seen Harry Potter and we can connect that together, right? And we know sort of narratively where that falls in the movie, and we understand the importance of that scene and why it was included in a Lego set. For something like a serialized TV show, you have so many of those scenes to pick from, but because the TV show doesn't necessarily, through its larger episodes, lead to any sort of larger narrative conclusion, right? Like a season just ends. There's no like arc over the course of the season. I think it's harder to build a set from one of those kind of smaller moments, right? The same reason, well, not really the same reason, but some things just don't translate really well into Lego. And I think we're seeing that here. But I'm curious, I mean, this is not a question that you have prepped, and I know we have some more questions here, but like, what if Lego were to make like a Halloween theme or a spooky theme Grinch? What do you think would be a good like set for them to make, right? Like, I think like a trick-or-treating set would be kind of cute, right? Like you could have a kid in a costume and a parent walking behind them and like a bag of candy or something.
Yeah.
But like, what else could really be like gleaned? I mean, well, I just thinking about it off the top of my head, like a Sleepy Hollow theme would be kind of fun, right? With like the Headless Horseman.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like an Icons of Horror theme would be a great theme for Lego to do, and they could put a lot of energy into like a Sleepy Hollow set, an Edgar Allan Poe set, a Dracula set, you know, a Frankenstein set. I don't know.
That's where I was gonna go in
Yeah.
terms of like what I mean, which is almost Monster Fighters, but of course, you know, Lego wants to put their like narrative, like, well, we have to have a story we're telling, right? We have to
Mm-hmm.
do, you know, something like that. What I think, you know, the question I have is, would a set like the Monster Fighters Haunted House, which is an awesome set, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
claiming that it's not at all.
Which,
Would a set
sorry,
like that?
I also just wanted to
Mm-hmm.
real quick interject that we are not even
Yeah,
talking about the Fairground set, the Haunted House set, which
correct.
on its own has done really, really well and has been a very exciting set too. So sorry,
Mm-hmm.
the Monster
Nope,
Fighters
that's okay.
discussion in the house just triggered that. So I wanted to
Yeah.
just kind of blurt out like, hey, we're not forgetting this. We're
Well, I mean,
but
yeah, and
again,
like, do you count like Johnny Thunder, like the Egypt?
yeah,
Like, do
with
you
like the
count that as a
mummies and
horror?
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't, because that, you know, like that's more akin to like Indiana Jones in my mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you know, when you say haunted house, there was a lot of like spooky callbacks to Baron von Baron and stuff like that, right? But
Yeah.
um, what I think, you know, or where I was going was like the Monster Fighters house. Is that only like, do we consider that probably the most successful set from like all the sets we're talking about, that and maybe the Mystery Machine, right, from Scooby Doo?
Mm-hmm.
Are those only held in such high regard because there's slim pickings in this area, right? And like everybody kind of loves this sub theme, but at the same time, or sub kind of culture, if you would, right? This isn't all one sub theme, but um, so everybody kind of gravitates towards one of those two sets, right? Like if you love Scooby Doo, you like that set. If you're not a huge Scooby Doo person, but you like monster stuff, you're like the Haunted House is just iconic. If there were
Mm-hmm.
more of these sets, would that be different?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Right? Because like Hidden Side, as much as you like it, flopped. So nobody's sitting here being like, man, that Hidden Side, that Newberry High School is sweet, right? And maybe it will get there one day. But so I think that's part of it, right? Because it's either you're either all the way there, you're either in the top 50 sets of all time in Lego history, or you're in the bottom 50. It seems like here. So is that why it's just the best are really amplified because it's the best of a smaller group, or
there's not a lot of in betweens, is there? It's just it feels like you said, it's either a greatest set of all time or it's in like people's like, you know, bottom 10 lists of themes.
right?
I don't know, that's interesting. I think too, right? Like it's hard for these sets to do well when they're competing with themes like Ninjago, with Star Wars, with other, you know, larger evergreen themes too, that just kind of like suck the air out of the room, if you will, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars has so much to build off of and to rebuild off of and to just revisit over and over again, right? Like one of the sets that has been predicted for this next year for Lego Harry Potter is another night bus, right? This is the third iteration of the night bus that we've gotten.
Third or
We already talked.
fourth, right?
I think it's the third technically.
Third. Okay.
But we can double check that. We've talked about land speeders, right? Like they've had like 7 of them.
Yeah.
And but they do change them and they do make adjustments and they do get better and better. And so, you know, with all of those improvements, right, when you can just revisit a theme every few years and literally remake a set, like Lego is you know, got themselves this really great position to be in, which is like, you know, it's almost self-sustaining. These monster themes and some of the IP that they're referencing are not just, they don't have the depth there to do that. And so I think that's really challenging when it comes to some of these areas, which is why, like I said, I think icons and sort of these smaller, very specific doses of themes does really, really well, right? The Wednesday theme, I can see why Lego was maybe tempted to do something like that. I think an Addams Family theme in like the icons range or something might do even better. You know what I mean?
Well, it is Wednesday Adam from that, right? So are we opening,
Right.
or are we
What
kind
I'm
of
saying though
opening
is
the
like a
path to
set.
that? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
one set based off of that movie in sort of the same theme as like The Office or Friends, where it's like a movie
Sure.
set or something like that. And I don't know, I haven't watched the Addams Family movie, so I am kind of out of my depth in this, but whether it's like the dining room from the house or, some set piece from the movie where you could feature all the minifigures or something, in
Yeah.
a meaningful way, that might be a really good set, but on its own, it would perform well. But as a theme, like I said, there might be a challenge here. So
I think, kind of wrapping this conversation up or starting to, you had asked me like, what would I like to see, right? And I
mm-hmm.
think ideas is really the route forward, right? Because it's gonna be the stuff that people want to see, right? Nightmare Before Christmas, Hocus Pocus, right? You don't need a full wave of Hocus Pocus. You don't necessarily need a full wave of Nightmare Before Christmas. What you need is the Monster Fighters Haunted House, the Scooby Doo Mystery Machine. You're cutting out some of the fluff to get more of the juicy steak, right? You're trimming some of that fat because you don't need a full wave of Nightmare Before Christmas. You just don't. I mean, I'm sure there's some people out there that would like it, and that's totally fine. But for the
Mm-hmm.
average consumer, they probably just want that one set that's going to encapsulate the theme for them, that they can have on that one display shelf that they can build around the holiday, right? Same thing with
And
Hocus Pocus, right? You don't need we just rewatched that. Like, what are you going to do? Like the adult dance and like song
in the
part,
gym,
or
yeah,
yeah, are you going to do like a trick or treat? Are you going to do like I mean, what else are you going to do from that movie is my point. Like,
yeah. No, it is tough.
it's gonna be some crappy little side build with like a couple minifigures, and you're gonna be like, yay, it's a picket fence and a door to go trick or treating.
I think that's where Lego Ideas has really kind of stepped in, like you said, but
Mm-hmm.
also Lego Icons, right? Because I think within that
Yeah,
theme,
yeah, either or.
Lego, in those themes, Lego's a lot more okay with doing sort of one-offs versus,
Mm-hmm.
like you mentioned, kind of having to fill a wider theme around it. So I
If
think as a company,
Lego, yeah,
they're a lot less hesitant to do a one or two set sort of microwave, if you will.
and you are setting me up. That's exactly what I was gonna. I would what I would love to see. Right. This doesn't necessarily mean I think it's gonna happen. If I was the creative director of spooky themes at Lego, I would take a big risk, right? And you can argue that they had with some of these things like Monster Fighters already, but there's a template that Lego has created, right? A narrative story with some recurring characters told through time. Look at Dreams.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that template works anymore. I think that template worked in the 2000s. I think it worked in the 2010s. I think with streaming, right? With social media, people are more focused on a specific story than they are a ongoing story. So I think people's attention spans don't go that far now, right? To be able to come out with 10 sets every 6 months of a theme and be like, here you go, here you go, here you go. Unless it's something like Star Wars that everybody knows, right? Something like Lord of the Rings, something like Harry Potter, where you can do that. So what I would really like to see is Lego come out with a Lovecraftian horror, right? Monster Fighter-esque type of set, and they do the Legends of Horror, right? And they do the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. They have a set that comes out in March. They've got a couple characters in that, right? If they need to tie it to the next one, they have those same two characters, but maybe in a different outfit, right? Sleepy Hollow was in Massachusetts, so maybe they do the Legend of the Mothman, and it's more of a, I don't think that would be a good example, but the Creature from the Black Lagoon, right? And then you've got the same characters, but in a different, so you know that they're the same people, but they've got a different kind of setup and different tools to go solve this mystery. And then, and a few months later, so rather than coming out with everything all at once with the same minifigures just sprinkled throughout to be like, look, it's the same people, guys, woohoo, like Hidden Side, where it's like the same. If you bought all the Hidden Side waves, you had like 10 of each of those minifigures, like identical, right? Have the gimmick and the collectible aspect of it be like, well, what tools do the minifigures need to solve this case, right? Well, maybe they need some weird scuba gear or something. I don't know, right? But so you do that, right? You do the Minnesota werewolf, and you've got a evil scientist, you something like that, where it's a little bit more time-pieced. It's a little bit more accurate and less driven by this narrative of like, well, we have to have these good guy monster fighters fighting these bad monsters that people recognize. Like, lean into the culture, right? Lean into the mythos of some of these stories already, and then find your way to narratively connect them.
No, that's a good point. I think you're still struggling. My fear, right, is that what this show.
If I have you fearing, I've done my job. I'm talking about spooky themes.
There you go. My fear is that we see a lot of evergreen Lego themes these days, other than City, other than Ninjago, being based on IP.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of Lego. And other than Friends. I just wish that wasn't the case. There's been so many like fun waves of Lego sets over the years that have been like created and invented by Lego. And now that Lego is able to dip into the IPs that they haven't in the past, right? Like, it does feel like some of that creativity is kind of, in a weird way, like lacking at Lego. And so when Lego does start their own theme like Hidden Side, it's exciting to see where that goes. But I do think, to your point, like, it needs to be really strongly rooted in something else. If it's going to be narratively focused, if there's going to be seasons, if there's going to be waves, it really has to be tied into some larger story. And how that story is communicated, I don't know, because we've seen Lego attempt literally everything under the sun. We've seen them attempt comics, we've seen them attempt video games, we've seen them attempt TV shows, right? Sometimes they go better than others do, right? Like Ninjago has done really, really well. And when they're like, this is based off of the show, I'm like, I don't know what that is, but like, the set looks cool. Like, I didn't watch the movie, the set looks cool, like it's just so interesting to see how that has worked. And I mean, like I said, we just got augmented reality with Hidden Side, right? Like, I don't know what the right answer is for Lego. I do like that they're trying this stuff, though. And I would hope that if they decide to dip their toes back into this theme, this spooky theme, that they think on some of the better, things that have worked for them in the past, and try to focus on that, because it would be fun to see a theme, even an evergreen theme, stick around for the spooky season. So.
Well, I hate to break it to you, West, but we just got Lego Wednesday and Lego Wicked, and I hope you're okay with it being mini doll focused, because that's what we got.
I know.
Part of me is like, this is going to be the death of spooky themes, isn't it?
Yeah. It's hard. It's it's challenging. I don't know what the right answer is. That's why I think I was excited about Hidden Side, was it really did offer a fun parallel to all of this stuff. But
I think they're finally shutting down the app, by the way, for Hidden Side.
Yeah. I'd be curious to see, and I know, I'm not trying to rehash our old episode. I'd be curious to see if the execution errors were not there with some of the box art, and maybe they didn't rely on the app as much as they tried to, right? I mean, that was Lego's augmented reality TikTok phase with video and all of that nonsense. I'd be curious to see how well the theme did. Yes, some of the sets were lacking, so if they maybe boosted
Yeah.
them up a little bit, I think they would have been onto something. But I
Well,
don't
and
know.
some of the
That's
sets were
just
lacking because they had to build in the augmented reality like changes, right? Like they had to
yeah.
monsterize all the sets, and they
Hmm.
had to have the little color piece on there so you could like see what it was and tell the app to do something.
Right.
So
Right. So there were certain features that were sort of forcibly incorporated into each of the sets to kind of make them do something specifically. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I think there was a lot of fun there to be had,
mhm.
and maybe potential left on the table. So
Well, I think that's a good place to kind of wrap up our conversation today. And we started it all out by saying, you know, why does Lego not do well with spooky themes, or do they? Right? Because they obviously, and I know when I said that, I know that you chuckled a little bit because I was like, or do they? Um, but but some of the stuff they've put out is really good. I mean, there's Monster Fighters is great. It's a cult classic at this point, right? Scooby
mhm.
Doo was good, right? The people who love Scooby Doo IP love that sub theme. Like those sets were solid. So it's not that they don't execute them well in a lot of cases, unlike Hidden Side, but the execution's fine, which kind of draws a larger question of, well, then do they just not sell well, right?
Mhm.
Do they just, you know, so is it that seasonality that we talked about? We don't know. You know, we're obviously having a discussion here today. So, you know, let us know your thoughts in the comment section, and tell us, write us, what would you like to see? Pitch us your spooky Lego theme in the
Yeah.
comment section. And so I think that's a good place to wrap up this conversation. Why don't we head over to our next segment? What are we building? What are we building? All right. So, what did you build this week, West?
All right. So Grinch. It's not that I've been on a building lull, but we've talked about
You've
the
been on a
move,
but
and
you've been on a building wall.
yeah, it's hard when you're moving. It's hard, and we're moving again, and so every time I see a Lego set at the store, I'm like, do I want this? Yes or no? I was able to go back to my previous, the town we just moved from. They just opened up a Lego store there recently. And so I was able to go in and see that for the first time. That was really neat. It was very busy.
Was
It was
that like
fun to see.
was that so bittersweet to be like, I lived here for like 7 years, and like like
Never had a Lego store.
7 months after I move, there's
Yeah.
a set, there's a store.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a little disappointing because I would have liked to have been there opening day. They always do those like fun opening day celebrations. What's
Oh,
really
hello,
interesting,
sir.
actually,
Did you come to town just for this? Like, no, bitch, I lived here for 7 years.
I helped create the market for this.
You don't understand. This is my store.
Back in my day, we had to just go to Target. The new Lego stores actually are really organized interestingly, and like the pick-a-brick, for the stores that we are used to, right? The pick-a-brick's always the back wall, and
Oh, is this a sidewall one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I don't hate because I actually went to the Thousandths store in San Antonio last year, Lego store,
Mm-hmm.
and they actually had like a special minifigure for that one, which was kind of neat. Not when I was there, but when it opened up. And I went to the pick-a-brick wall, and there was some great pieces there, and I was just chatting with one of the associates, and she was like, "Oh, well, like we have more in the back in like different colors," and I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Okay." She's like, "Do you want some?" And I was like, "Please." And so I got like all of these masonry bricks in like all these different colors, and it was just like really neat to be able to do that. So,
God, what a good
first
piece.
off, sidewalls, feel free to talk to people about the pick-a-brick because they might have stuff in the back like that, and they might be able to.
I think it varies by store too. Some stores, and this is just what I've heard, like some stores will use the oh my God, I did it again. The pick-a-brick wall to I had a speako. Some stores will use the pick-a-brick wall to like draw foot traffic in, so like they will actively rotate more than others. You know, some stores I've gone into, and over the years, it's just the same stuff, right? It's just like 2x2 transparent blues, and I'm like, well, I only need so many of those, right? Or like that's so specialized that like I don't, you know, unless I need a lot of those, I don't need any of them. And other stores will rotate through and get you more in demand bricks, right?
Curation, and I think that has to do with the store manager and their relationship with the local lugs and local AFOL communities, because I think a lot of that AFOL community at the Lego store actually drives that demand, which I think is kind of fascinating. But anyway, so what I wanted to get to was, I haven't been doing that, but I just noticed the other day that the Lego Horizon Forbidden West game is coming out on the Switch too. And so I don't know when that's coming out, but
17th of November.
Bought a video game in years. I think the last video game I bought was Mario Kart for the Switch, and I don't think I've actually played it on my Switch. I've played it before. I just haven't played it on my console.
I came over on July 4th and we played Super Mario Strikers on Switch.
Oh, that's right. That was fun.
Oh, what a good game.
But was that your Switch or my Switch?
That was, Cat's Switch.
So, yeah. But, yeah. Are
you gonna get Lego Horizon?
Well, I was gonna say, so I sold my Xbox to GameStop. I got $20 for it.
Yeah, rip.
I just wanted it out of the house. It was an OG version of the Xbox One, so I wasn't gonna get much for it. They wouldn't even take the Kinect. So
as a PlayStation Sony bro, it was an Xbox. So sorry.
Yeah, well. So that's what I'm building. I'm not building anything this week, but it is what is getting me excited for Lego. I'm excited for Lego Horizon Forbidden West.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to see that universe in the Lego form, and yeah, I think I'm gonna be buying a video game here in the future. Man, big growth for West over here.
It's I'm proud of you, buddy. I'm proud of you. I would also like to point out to the listeners that for those that are content creators, like we had Mav on our show last week, and I think he gets it. It takes time to create this content. I mean, we spend multiple hours a week producing this show, which really actually, time is one of the only finite resources that we all have that we never know how much we have of, right? And so when it comes to really budgeting,
philosophical here on AFOLs Welcome.
Sorry, I've had too much coffee this morning. When it comes to your Lego time every week, like if we're producing this podcast for like 4 or 5 hours, like
we're not building.
That's Lego. Time you would spend building, right? So it can be some weeks it truly is just like, well, I'm talking about Lego. I'm literally digging through price history on different websites for Lego, looking at monster Lego sets. I'm not building anything, but like, so I did just want to call that out as like, this is our Lego time too at the same time. So if you're ever thinking about getting into the content creation space, just be aware of that, because like Wes and I have 9-to-5s or whatever. I was traveling for work this week, and Lego vending machine at the airport, as badly as I wanted to go get one, it's always hard to walk into a room with a bunch of senior vice presidents or stuff and have them be like, hey guys, let's go to the bar. And be like, actually, just got Bumpy the Ankylosaurus from a Lego vending machine. I was going to build that tonight instead of network, you guys. So really, really looking forward to this.
So wait, first off, did you get one from the vending machine?
No.
I've never done that either, but I really want to now, almost just for the sake of doing it. But there was nothing at the vending. I saw one, and I traveled yesterday too. I flew through Charlotte, and I did not see anything in the Charlotte vending machine that I was like, oh my God, I got to get that. Or even kind of was like, I could get that, give you an excuse,
I fly to the
right?
Kansas City airport a lot now, and they have a brand new Lego store in there because they just redid the whole airport. And so it's anytime I go with the coworker, they're like, "Hey, did you know? Did you see that? Are you gonna stop in there?" And I'm like, guys, like, there's my favorite thing is like all my coworkers will text me stuff and be like, "Did you see there's a Lego Simba?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it was revealed like 6 months ago." Well, okay. What don't you? Anytime I tell you about a Lego set, you already know it exists. I'm like, do you not understand? Like, I do a Lego podcast. Like, it's like I'm not gonna say it's my job, but like, I have to know about these things.
Yeah.
You just realized Lego existed because I told you about it a month ago. I know that the Titanic Lego set exists already. Trust me.
Yeah.
I was there when it was revealed, you guys. But
Don't
from a
quote
Lego
the dark
like
magic at me.
yeah. From a what am I building perspective, last night I started the I worked on my Lego display room a little bit. Update video coming on that this Friday. And then
Nice.
I'm still putting the final touches on my last Lego Ideas project, but that should be have got my to-do list is long and my currently doing list is also long. So like my goal this weekend and the next couple of weeks is to get that currently doing list just get shit checked off. So gonna get the Lego Ideas project posted by the end of this week too, hopefully. And then I also started the Captain America shield. And I think that's a perfect example of like a set that like does it need to exist. Like it's really cool. Like the Thor hammer is really cool, but like as I'm building it, I'm like, who greenlit this? Like I like literally I'm like step number 20 and every step before that has either been a times 17 or a times 34.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, guys, like this is an example of like, can we build this? Yes. Do we need to package this and sell it to people? Probably not. But we can build it.
There's been a lot of sets like that recently.
Yeah, it's almost like I feel like there's a couple new creative directors or something like that at Lego that are like, yes, do it. Do it. Do it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to build it.
We talked
shield,
about it.
Do it.
Earlier today because we were looking at the stuff that was on sale. We talked about this, at the beginning of the episode, but the one of them that was on sale was the Venomized Groot, and I was like, man, I forgot this was even a thing. And you were like, yeah, there's like been a few things that have been Venomized in like the story, and I mean, it was like when they came out with the Carnage set and like the masks and stuff, and I know there's a market for it, right? But like you have to assume Lego always wants like a certain threshold for things before they like cross that line. And there's been a few sets where it's just like, you guys really went with that, right? Now, again, and we say this a lot on this podcast, but we don't know how many they've produced. So maybe and if Lego's, as good as they probably are, they're probably running them in lower production runs than some of the other sets where they're like, no, this is we are confident this will sell well. So we're going to, and I'm sure they have the ability to do things in waves, right? I mean, we saw that with the Orient Express of like, if you bought the set in the quote unquote first wave, it had an incorrect sticker. Subsequent waves of production probably had corrected stickers.
I mean, so the other thing I was building this week before I went on my trip was the Parisian restaurant. It was one of the ones that I bought used. The person told me there was a little bit yellowing, and I didn't notice it on the Parisian restaurant until I got to the roof, and I was like, oh, crap, yeah. So that I'm actually, after this podcast today, I'm going to go bleach those pieces.
There you go.
So I can finish it tomorrow.
To remind you of what you've been building. That was a good one. That's a fun set. I really like that
one, actually. Well, so I'm looking at the little fence piece, the 1x4x4 fences, maybe it's 1x3x4. Like with the rod spool fencing, and I don't know the exact date, like 2016 or something, it was a stud, flat, and then a stud, on the 1x4 part on the top.
Yeah.
After that, it's stud, 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 stud. There's 4 studs. So this is an example of literally on Bricklink, they're called counterparts, or not counterparts, they're called alternative parts. A counterpart on Bricklink would be an assembly of a part. So for example, there's a couple parts that you snap together that you can't unsnap. Those are counterparts where there's technically 2 pieces, but when you put them together, it becomes a counterpart. So not like a hinge. Those are, the hinge itself is one piece, but
so what would be an example of that? It's not. I'm trying to think of one.
I believe like something with stickers. I'm trying to find an example. But so an alternative part, however, is a part that, this set, this production run had this version of this piece, and during the set's lifetime, like the assembly square is a perfect example. During that set's lifetime, this piece changed, right? Like they're still selling assembly square, but that set's been on the market since 2017,
right?
And that's 7 years. Parts have changed since then, right? The standard has. So they have alternative parts where it's like, if you buy the set, it might have this part, or it might have this part, or like the modified clip, right? The 1x1 clip piece, where it used to be flat to the base of the plate. It's and now more symmetrical, right?
Or not hinged.
So that would be a alternative part.
Yeah. No, that's interesting.
Right? So I didn't realize that. So we were just talking about that just now. When you were what you were suggesting of like, the Orient Express, for example, where Lego came out with
like different
the sticker sheet and they updated it, right?
Production runs of one set. Yeah.
So an example of a counterpart would be a window with a window plate inside of it.
Okay.
Or the turkey, right, with the 2 drumsticks on the side. Like on Bricklink, you can buy that with the window on the inside.
Drumstick. Yeah.
Right. Or you can buy just the drumstick or the drumstick and the turkey, right? There's that completed turkey piece, although that turkey body itself is its own.
Right.
So
nice.
A couple examples there, some Bricklink knowledge for everybody that's listening. And yeah, Parisian restaurant's good. So, but yeah, it's easier for me to bleach the pieces now than it is to like put it all together and be like, well, time to take it apart. And
fair.
So I got to a point where, because I had already done it with the white and I didn't do it the gray, and I'm like, I was kicking myself. I'm like, oh, I should have just known that like the next most common color is gray. But I'm moving right along. I did have a little mishap, unfortunately. I bought a bunch of modulars used. I bought a bunch from the one person who told me, he's like, hey, greengrocer, price was insane, by the way, on it. Like I'm talking like sub $800 I got this greengrocer for. And after I bought it, he was like, hey, I just noticed this. There's some yellowing. And I'm like, that's all good as long as it's not on the sand green. And he was like, nope, it's just the white. Perfect. He's like, I've got it all separated. Cool. So I bought like 6 modulars from this guy. I got this Parisian restaurant separate with the pet shop from somebody. All good, except for this Parisian restaurant, a little bit yellowing. Yellowing doesn't bother me. It's really easy to fix. I got a brick bank on Reddit Lego Market, and it's damaged. I mean, it's damaged.
What happened? What's damaged?
It's not like bite marks or anything, and it would technically be used. Although me being a nitpicky a-hole, I would say it's damaged. The only problem is I bought this back in April and I'm just building it now. So like, what do I do? Like, I can't go back to the guy and be like, hey, by the way, like months have passed. I've already confirmed it right in the Reddit thing, but I should have. So I bought another Bricklink, brick bank, and what I'll probably do is I'll probably sell this one for like $200 and just be like, hey, just FYI, like these pieces are technically used, but like they're a little bit more roughly used. But for example, like they've shipped it to me with like the bottom plate of assembled, so like all the tiles were on it, right? Just
Oh, that's
that
weird.
first floor.
No.
Yeah, but what it looks like is they, literally had all the other pieces on there and like just shuck it. Like it looks like, because like there's just some, not gashes in the plastic, like not like where it's raised or lowered, but I mean some real bad scrapes on it. Like almost like you took some scissors to it to be like slash slash slash. So it's not raised, it's not technically damaged, but my God, some of these pieces are like, I don't even know. Yeah, I mean, it looks like somebody played with the brick bank, but like played hard with it. Like minifigure walking around, scraping it up, and just like scashing the side of it. So that was.
How's the second floor?
Why? What do you need? Do you need pieces from it? You can go through them if you want, but like even the printed windows, like the printing's fine, but like how those transparent pieces get all marked up. Like, I mean, I cleaned this set, and like it looks like parts of the pieces were maybe burnt, and some pieces might have had some super glue on them because there's a thin film of stuff on it, and I'm like,
what?
This is damaged, dude. I'm like, this is. My guess is they bought it in a bulk lot or something. I don't know. I also bought Barracuda Bay from them, but that's sealed, so like that's all good. But this was disappointing. I'll let you go through the pieces when you come visit. Ironically, I found one on Bricklink, and like it's not like they didn't. I mean, the posting just said used brick bank.
Yeah.
Partially disassembled, and I was like, cool, it's a good price. Let's do it. He's selling other sets, new and used. He's got good history. It's just, I'm just trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. I doubt that they,
Yeah, we're intentional.
Yeah.
We've already droned on what we're building this week, so I'm going to spare the listeners for the brick bank discussion, but I have a lot of thoughts on that set, that modular specifically. It is a favorite modular of mine, but it is also one of the modulars that is extremely frustrating for me.
Why?
For reasons we can talk about. Well, okay.
Now you have to. That's like me being like, hey, West, I need to tell you something, but I'm not going to tell you right now.
That's okay. Fair enough. The frustrating thing for me with modulars in the modern modular line that has really ended with the police station, but started with the detective's cafe, or not the detective's
office,
cafe, but the detective's office, has been, and we've talked about this a little bit. One is the inclusion of bathrooms always bothers me in them. So like, and I get it, right? Like,
where are the minifigures gonna poop?
Yes, exactly. No, to some extent, yes. To some extent, no. Right. My issue with it is like you're building an entire building, and it's fine, right? And we talked about the scale and realism in Lego, and like how it's not always perfect. In fact, they're not perfect at all. So, but when you have something like a building, like a bank, and you have it built out, it's just like, yeah, like there is no restroom at all in this building, and it is kind of silly. And so that does bother me. What also bothers me with that building specifically is sort of the dollhouse features. And so the dollhouse features, which we see in things like the detective's office and the police station, is where I think it's at its worst. Is if you open up every floor, you'll actually notice that they're open. There's an open partition in the ceiling, in the wall. And so between the donut shop and the police station, there's actually an opening. And you could write a funny story about it, right? Of like, yeah, it's so the police can smell donuts all day long. But I think it's legitimately done so you can stick your hand in there.
Right? So you can get your hand in there and more light can get into.
Right. Yeah. Where I think modulars have started getting better with this, which is sort of interesting because they've done it in the past, is the new Natural History Museum, where you're actually able to take that section out, lift out the wall piece in between, in the back there on the first floor. And that's what I think all the modulars need to be incorporated with. The new Lego Ninjago City did it really well, where you just like pull the room out of the side. And that's where I think the new modulars almost need to go is finding ways to make things more accessible. The Botanical Gardens does this really well, where you can pull walls off and stuff, without kind of building accessibility into the set, because I think that kind of takes you out of the set a little bit in my mind.
Yeah, they almost did it to be like so you can access it, but can you still access it well?
Right. And the brick bank does that too to some extent, because you can pull things like the chimney off and some of the larger features off. So there's definitely some of that built into it. Where issues I have with the brick bank specifically, other than that, are when you have like the stairwell that goes upstairs to the roof. If you open it up, you notice that like the way that they did the slopes on the back is done in such a way that it's not like easily accessible. And then it's only like they interrupt it because they build the wall into the door frame instead of on the side of the door frame. And so it's not 4 wide with the door frame. You open up the door and it's like there's a brick wall right like on a portion of it. It really interrupts it, and it looks really odd. And it just, so like I've been trying to scheme, and I wasn't able to do this before I left, but like modify mine so like that entryway upstairs was like done better. And it just bothers me that like stuff like that isn't allowed to exist in Lego, but like it just feels kind of unpolished, and it's like it just feels like sort of blocky, and like not necessarily unrealistic to some extent, although it is sort of unrealistic to some extent. But it's like, have you ever seen a house or been in a house where there's like a countertop and then there's like a window, and the counter is like higher than the window, and so it just like drops off or something, or there's like some weird feature in a house like that, and you're like, clearly the counter was you did this after you put the window in, and then you're like, why didn't you think about that when you put the window in? And it just,
and if you did it, and if you did it after the window, what the hell were you thinking?
Right. Or like, okay, I guess this works, but like now this, I can't shake the feeling that like this is all done sort of after the fact, and sort of like haphazardly almost. And that's the vibe I get from some of these builds sometimes with this, especially some of the older modulars, where they're just not as polished as the new ones are. Even some of what we would call the modern modulars, some of them still sort of lack some of the polish of the newer ones. So kind of bringing this full circle, I have seen people build an extra floor into the brick bank, and I think that looks really, really good. It was one of the only 2-story modulars when Lego was really kind of pushing 3-story modulars for a while. So a third floor, and that looks really good. So if those pieces are in great shape, a third floor would be kind of fun to build. And then when I parted mine out, I never bought the stained glass windows, because those were like $40 a piece. So,
well, you can have mine. They're not in great shape, but you can have them.
Yeah. You're saying they're not in great shape?
I'm just picky, to be honest. Like, my problem is all my other modulars are good. So like if I'm sitting there going through them all, I'm like, why the hell is this one damaged? So like for me, talking about curating your collection, we've talked about before, like I want them all to be similar, right? I don't mind buying them used, because that's how they're going to look after I build them anyways and move with them once. So like that doesn't bother me. Also, like if you talk about a return on your investment, like you will never get a return on buying like a $2,000 set new in box, just open it up and sell it for $8. Like you just won't. So it also just protects the investment a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you can dig through them. What I could have done is dug through the pieces and been like, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. That would have taken me a weekend. Then get the new pieces, and then so I just don't have the time right now. So like I can afford to buy another one for $400, so I did. And I was just going to sell this one for like $2. But if you want it, when you're here, when you come visit, dig through it.
Yeah. Well, let me see what I can do, and then we can part out the rest of it. So.
Well, that is our most robust. What are we building this week? This is like a what are we building this year section. That's okay. That's what it's supposed to be.
We droned on and on, but that's good.
We were light on news, so yeah. No. All good. All right, let's go ahead and move over to our next section, Brick Mail. Brick Mail. All right, so a lot of good feedback about last week's episode. I'll take the first one here, Wes. So we got Your boy Taco said 2604, referencing the time in the episode. He said, that's exactly how I sort my minifigures. What he's referring to is when I talked about the story of West as a young lad taking apart minifigures, torsos, and arms and legs. And Taco actually sent me a picture of how he does it. And like the organizational person in me was like, amazing. So that was really good. So that's how he's got his minifigures sorted. And then he said, also, I freaking loved this episode. So I reached out. I asked him what he liked about it. He said, I really liked the little brother energy that came out. And I also laughed at the bad reviews in general. So as always, Taco, thank you for the support. Thank you for sharing, and happy building, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you, Taco. Appreciate it. We also got a note from, and I'm going to butcher this name, at CV-GM8IC.
Sounds about right. I don't think you butchered it at all. You're good at spelling, West.
Yeah, that was it exactly. They wrote, I love this episode so much. We appreciate it. And we definitely enjoyed that too. The game was a lot of fun. Mav was a great competitor. And it was really
13
fun
to 6
and his like, oh, okay. Well, there will be other games in the future. I think we really enjoyed making that episode and working with Mav, and we have discussed it on our own. And I think it's fair to say, I don't think we're ready to announce specifics, but we would like to continue to highlight content creators on the internet, especially content creators who maybe are not, and Mav, please don't take this the wrong way, spotlighted as much as some of the ones that I think we are all aware of. If we were to speak to content creators or of content creators right now on the internet, I'm sure we could all name, a top 10 that are pretty similar, right? So it's nice to just hear from other people. And it was great to hear
the up and comers in the content world.
Exactly.
Yeah. The rookies, they're just drafted in the NFL.
They show a lot of promise.
That's right.
Am I digging the hole deeper at this point, or have I?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure at Mavbricks, go ahead and follow him, is gonna have a nice meme to make fun of West this next week, probably.
Well, we really appreciated it. We really enjoyed hanging out with Mav, and so we want to feature more content creators like that in the future to kind of join us in these episodes. So.
And I think we're currently planning on having Mav back on the show probably towards the start of next year. So we've got our schedule pretty booked here for the rest of the year, and then we're going to take a slight break around the holiday and then be back at it. So we'll get him on the show here. It sounds like a far time away, but really it'll be like within the next like 9-ish episodes probably. So certainly not too far. Another Spotify comment from Jay. Jay, if this is you, like, you know who you are, Jay. If it is, message me on Discord. It's been a while, buddy. But he said, he or she said, great episode. I really enjoyed your guest and game. Looking forward to more episodes like this one. So a lot of good feedback on the game. A lot of good feedback on featuring a guest. A lot of good feedback on the guest. So thank you, Mav, again for joining us last week. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for the nice remarks. And it's been a while since we had an iTunes review. So if you're listening and you're enjoying the show on iTunes, please leave us a review or provide us feedback right into the show. Give us feedback. We'd love to hear it, good or bad, so that we can improve and make this experience better for you. And that is a wrap of another episode of AFOLs Welcome. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you are listening to this show. If you would like to write the podcast, please email us at afolswelcome@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at afolswelcome. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye.